which is, again, on the recent IRS data retrieval tool outage, as well as a little bit of an overview of the verification process. All right, so the IRS data retrieval tool, what is it? I'm sure many of you know this, but it is a tool that allows for the direct electronic transfer of processed tax info from the IRS's website into the FAFSA. And so it truly is taking a student when they're completing their FAFSA to the IRS's website, and then the student can select to have all of their information from their tax returns automatically populated to answer the income-related questions on the FAFSA. And they can also do this for the parents' tax information part on the FAFSA also. This tool has been around for a while, so it's been a part of the FAFSA process since the 2009-2010 school year. Now, this year, since we transitioned to prior year tax info, so we're using 2015 tax information to complete this year's FAFSA, students have been able to use this tool more widespread because their tax information is already processed. In the past, a lot of times counselors, financial aid people didn't really use this tool as often because students and their families were waiting for their tax returns to be processed. So they would just manually enter in the tax information into the FAFSA. So this year it's been really great because a lot of our students have been able to take advantage of this tool. And what makes this tool so wonderful is that it reduces the chance of a student being selected for verification. And what verification is, and I'm going to go over this in a few slides, but basically it's the process where students have to verify that certain information on their FAFSA is true. And oftentimes when they have to verify their income on the FAFSA, they have to secure and send in an IRS transcript to their school's financial aid office. So it's this whole other process that's very involved and can be very confusing and overwhelming to a student. So the IRS data retrieval tool is great because it reduces their chances of having to go through that process. Also, the IRS data retrieval tool just helps speed things up, so students don't have to spend the time digging through their tax returns or with their parents going through tax returns to figure out what info to put in on the FAFSA. It just speeds things up a lot, and this can really be an important thing, especially for low-income first-generation students. So what happened to the IRS data retrieval tool? So it actually went down on March 3rd, which is very unfortunate timing because a lot of schools have their priority financial aid deadlines March 1 or after. And so it's going to provide a barrier to some students finishing their FAFSA in a timely manner. They didn't make a statement about, that it was going down or why it went down until the following week. And what they said basically is that there are concerns about possible identity theft as related to the IRS data retrieval tool, though that we're aware of there have not been any actual cases of that happening. So basically they said they want to look into these concerns and make sure that the tool is secure. So the IRS and the Department of Ed are having to work together on this. And they said that the tool is going to be down for several weeks. So very vague. My definition of several weeks may be different than your definition of several weeks or their definition of several weeks. So that's why I really wanted to do this webinar today, because it could be possible that we don't have the IRS data retrieval tool up before high school students graduated. So I wanted to make sure everyone was familiar with what was going on, and hopefully in this webinar I'll present a couple of workarounds or just information on how to get students through this process if they do get selected for verification. So like I said earlier, verifications when a student and or their parents must submit additional documents to verify that what they put into their FAFSA is accurate. So a student can determine if they've been selected for verification by logging into their FAFSA. And once they log in, there's a little blue button kind of at the bottom that says View Student Aid Report. The student should click on that, and then in the first paragraph or two, it will tell the student whether or not they've been selected for verification, and then it's going to prompt them to contact their school's financial aid office to see what documents they need. Well, students have probably already been getting emails and mail from their schools saying you've been selected for verification, this is what we need from you, but I've often found that students don't pay attention to those. So if you are working with a student through this process and you see on their student aid report that they did get selected for verification, ask them to pull up their email or ask them if they've got anything from in the mail from the school that they're planning to attend, asking for those additional documents. And that's a good starting point, because then you can determine what it is the student actually is going to need to submit. So one of the common items asked to prove by colleges in the verification process is income. So like I said earlier, if they were able to use the IRS data retrieval tool, they are more than likely not going to be selected for that verification item, because that information is coming directly from the IRS, so there's no need to prove it. When a student is selected, though, for verification of income, the most acceptable documentation for that is an IRS tax transcript. And again, like we said, if they use the data retrieval tool, they're more than likely not going to be asked to submit that. So what does all this mean? Tax information can now not be transferred electronically from the IRS into the FAFSA, so it's going to have to be manually entered. And the inability to use this data retrieval tool means that students are more than likely going to be selected for verification, and they're going to have to be required to provide an IRS tax transcript to their school. And so I'm going to go over kind of what that process looks like, just in case you do have a student that gets selected. And more than likely, you'll see this at some point if you're working on FAFSA with students. So like I said, use what you've got. So students and parents need to enter their 2015 tax info manually. So hopefully they still have their tax forms. If not, they can also request a transcript for that. So that's even before they get to the verification process. If they don't have access to their 2015 tax info and they need to get it, that's one way they could do it. If it is a student that's actually renewing their FAFSA, since we're using 2015 info on this year's FAFSA, and that's what we also used on last year's FAFSA, they could actually copy that info, the tax info from last year's FAFSA, because it hasn't changed. Also, if they're really in a pinch, and this would only be, if they don't have access to their 2015 tax returns, and by the way, when they do request a transcript from the IRS, it can take up to 10 business days. Say they're in a pinch and they've got a priority deadline for their school coming up, they can use their 2015 W-2s, if they have them, to estimate some of those income questions, but they will need to go back and adjust it with the accurate information from a transcript. And so, like I said, if they don't have access to any of those things, they can request one after submitting the FAFSA or before. So really quickly, when you're in the FAFSA, this is what it looks like when it starts asking students about tax information. And so the first questions when you get into the tax part are asking, have you completed your IRS income tax return or another tax return, and what is your filing status? And then it prompts them to link to the IRS. So this is still on the FAFSA, which is very frustrating. So all of this still looks exactly the same on the FAFSA. So it says applying is faster and easier if you transfer your tax return info into this FAFSA with the IRS data retrieval tool. And then it says link to IRS. So if a student clicks on that, it's going to take them, again, to the same page it always has, leaving FAFSA on the web, basically saying, hey, we're taking you to the IRS website now, and we're going to pull your tax info into the FAFSA. So it still is letting them proceed to the IRS site. So it's still encouraging them to use this tool that is no longer available. And then at that point, when they get to the IRS website, it says, sorry, this is unavailable. Now, one thing that is particularly frustrating about this is if a student has walked through all of this, so they've gotten to this point that they're on the IRS website, they can't backspace or, use tools in the browser to go back into their FAFSA. They actually are going to have to log back in. So that can be rather annoying when you're doing FAFSAs with a lot of students and you're under time constraints. And it's also just confusing a lot of times for the student. So make sure that if you are doing this with the student, they aren't clicking link to the IRS at this time, because it goes nowhere and then they have to go back and log into their FAFSA. And so, back to this page, there's the option you can skip the IRS transfer or proceed. And like I said, when you proceed, it goes to this. But then if you click skip, it even encourages them again, like, hey, you really should use this data retrieval tool. And so it's just frustrating and confusing to me why it's still prompting them and strongly encouraging them to use this tool and it's not available. So students, what if they don't have access to the transcript, or they need it to complete their FAFSA, or they need it because they don't have their 2015 tax info anymore, or they need it for verification process? They can request these transcripts online or by phone. I've heard varying opinions on which is the better way to do it. I've personally only ever done it over the phone with students. I tried it online once and got kind of frustrated. And so I've only used the phone. It's just like an automated system. They can also actually download a form and fax it in. That may be the most comfortable thing for them. I've provided a link in here. You can also just Google this form. And it's a very simple form. It's 1 page long. And so I've been told that if it's not being sent to the student within 10 to 15 days, they need to probably submit or refax a request. And so if you are going to work with students on filling out these forms to request their tax transcripts, I would go ahead and maybe have some printed and ready for them. Make sure, just like with filling out the FAFSA, always good to sit and assist and be patient with them. I have been informed that if the student does make a mistake while they're filling it out, to just start over. They will not accept forms with scratch outs or white outs. And so the student, once they complete the form, they're going to fax it to the IRS, and then the student should be mailed the tax return transcript. The student should not have it mailed to their school in any circumstance, even if it is actually, the student doesn't even really need their tax transcript. They've already filled out their FAFSA, but their school needs it for verification. The student should still get it mailed to their home and then in turn get it to their school's financial aid office. And we'll just say every school's financial aid office varies in how they accept those forms. Some schools want you to fax it to them. Some have like an online portal where they can actually upload these documents for verification. So make sure the student knows what the school wants. And like I said, follow up with the student 10 to 15 days later, because if they haven't gotten their transcripts yet and they've requested it through fax or on the phone or online, then they probably need to make another request. And so that is the main portion of this presentation. Really quickly, I did want to show you a tool that we have on our website, and I'm going to be sending it out in Monday's email. It is a flyer, and I have put this in emails before, but I just updated it to include this year's Pell Grant amount. But it's a workshop flyer that's actually promoting FAFSA completion events, so you can actually download this and customize it for whatever you've got going on. But on the back of it, what it shows is what a student needs to complete their FAFSA. But even better, what we've done is we made it into a little worksheet that shows them basically based on, you know, what type of tax return your parents filed or you filed. This is the income related information that's going to be asked from you by the FAFSA, and we have here the different lines on the tax form that it can be found on. So this is kind of a workaround to the IRS data retrieval tool. Even last year we used this flyer a lot before we went to prior year, and students a lot of times weren't able to use the IRS data retrieval tool. And so this is just kind of an easy way and a way that a lot of times parents feel a little bit better about is, you know, just filling in the blanks on this form instead of bringing in the entire folder of tax information to a FAFSA completion workshop. And you'll see also in the big green lettering in the middle, I've added, do not click on link to the IRS on your FAFSA. It does not work. Again, that's just going to cause confusion, unfortunately, because they're going to have to log back in. So make sure they're not clicking link to the IRS because it doesn't work. So at this time, I'm going to take any questions, if there are any. And seeing that there's none, I'm just going to go ahead and conclude this webinar because I did say I was going to try to keep us under 30 minutes. But thank you so much for attending. Thank you all that you do to help students with FAFSA. And again, the deadline for the Cash for College incentives is March 31, so there's still a little bit of time for schools to boost their FAFSA numbers and claim that prize. So have a wonderful afternoon, and thank you.